In today's fast-paced work environment, mental health is a vital yet often overlooked aspect of employee well-being. While awareness is growing, many professionals still struggle to speak openly about their challenges due to stigma, fear of judgment, or concerns about job security. Addressing mental health in the workplace is not just important, it is very essential. Open conversations create a supportive culture, boost productivity, and improve overall well being. By normalizing discussions and prioritizing mental health, organizations can build an inclusive and resilient workforce where employees feel valued, supported, and empowered to seek help when required. Mental health is no longer just a personal concern, it's a business imperative. Today, we are honored to have with us the esteemed Mahalakshmi Narayan Swami, a trailblazer with over 29 years of expertise in the financial domain. As a seasoned research analyst and editor, she has shaped narratives at Business Standard and Outlook Business, and now leads as the senior consulting editor of Money Control. While numbers and analysis may be your forte, today's discussion ventures into a different yet equally critical domain. In this special Women's Day edition, we'll explore how, as custodians of our people well-being, we can foster a workplace culture that prioritizes mental health. We welcome you on this call. Can we begin, Mahalakshmi?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mamshel. It's wonderful to be talking to you.
Great. Then let's dive into the questions. And my first question to you today is, what advice would you give to working women on effectively balancing their professional responsibilities and home life?
Okay. I don't think I'm in any capacity to give any advice to anybody. The only belief that I have had, which in a way has held me in good stead, is that when you enter work life or when you decide that you want a career, the one thing you should strongly believe in is that at workplace you are competing with your peers, whether it is a man or a woman. You're competing there as equals, so you have to be absolutely prepared to compete as a professional in workplace. Whatever your work home issues are, whether it is caregiving, motherhood, or any other responsibility, you need to figure out how to sort it out. But the moment you step out of home, you are on equal footing, and you need to have that nerve resilience, whatever you call it. But how do you do this? It's easier said than done. But one thing I have done again, which has helped me a lot, is to be absolutely shameless about asking for help from wherever it comes. You may think that my mother-in-law should do this, my husband should do that, or somebody else should do this. It may not necessarily come from the same quarters, but wherever help comes from, you should just take it and see it as a blessing. And you should have no qualms absolutely in accepting help and hustling and leveraging whatever you have to finally go towards the goal that you want to. So just to give you an anecdote, which even till today, I do this sort of hustling. One of my boys is in the 11th standard, and he has some project work, and we had to submit it in like 3 days. It was just like a journal which needed to be copied. There were some 40-50 pages of it, and then I asked around, is there somebody who can sort of I can pay some money and get this project work done, and nothing was working out. So I called up this aunt of mine who's like nearly 70 years old, but of course they all know English, right? And they can write. So I scanned the entire 40 pages in a PDF and sent it across to her and said, can you please, she's sitting at home and getting bored and reading vernacular papers and magazines. She said more than happy to help. She's in Delhi, and she did it and sent it. So you have to sort of quickly figure out where can you how can you reduce your own stress points by taking help from wherever it comes from. This is the only thing that has really helped me, and I would just say that we should not hold anything at all. Ask for help, and wherever you get it, please take it.
So I think in one line, let's not shy away and let's take help wherever required. And that
Yes,
always helps,
yes.
right? Okay, my
And I
next
think
question.
it's an edge that women have. I often see that men hesitate a lot in asking for help, and women, on the contrary, can sort of let their guards down, and they are okay to show their vulnerability. So it is. I think it's an edge. So we should sort of utilize it to the hilt.
I agree on that. So my next question would be, as a leader, how do you think corporate attitude towards employee mental health evolved in India over the last few years?
So I'm really not into HR, in the sense that I don't know what various companies are doing at any level of depth to be able to articulate. But from whatever I understand, I think the decibel levels around employee well-being has definitely gone up. See, all of this, whether it is gender diversity, whether it is something that we all take now for granted, like a posh. When I joined the workforce in 20, I think 2000, I joined. I think 2002 or three. That is when the posh regulations came up. It was still, people were not taking those committees seriously. I was in business standard at that time, and I remember that I became actually one of the, in the first year when the committee was formed, you needed to have some independent member on the board from a non-profit organization, and so on and so forth. And I was part of the committee. So nothing really happened. It was still all very vague. We were just putting some practices in place. But today, I don't think there is any organization that doesn't take it very, very seriously. There are committees. There is a very proper manual. There are quizzes that you do to ensure that all your employees actually understand their rights well. So, in every aspect, this is an evolutionary process. I think, with respect to mental health, we are still at a very nascent stage of evolution, where we are still at a level where companies are also probably just about warming up to the idea that this is also an issue that we need to solve for. Uh, and I think I may be wrong, but that's about it. I don't think it has reached a stage that certain other objectives, which probably took off like 15, 20 years ago, have obviously come a long way.
Yes, I'll agree to that to a certain extent because, in India, mental well-being is still a taboo to some organizations. And most other organizations, they have a lot of engagement activities,
Right,
and mental well-being is always, well-being is misunderstood. So
right.
if they feel that there's an insurance company that brings in a lot of flavors and a lot of activities, they have a lot of things on wellness. But
Hmm.
that's not true. They're just webinars. They
Hmm.
don't address mental issues or mental
Right,
well-being of
right.
people. Yeah,
Correct.
but I think, as you rightly said, we will evolve and it is evolving, and I'm sure it's going to help. So we move on to our next question, and that is, um, again, related to the previous one. Why is employee wellness then crucial today for organizations?
So when you frame a question like that, why is it not? I mean, it's very obvious that, employee wellness is indeed important for organizations, right? And depending on, I mean, even whether you're a manufacturing company, a service company, a labor intensive company, or a purely like in media organizations, I mean, there is no raw material. People are the raw material in a way that that's all. Your assets are people. So it has to be a center of plate. It is the most important thing. uh, so obviously their well-being has to be crucial to the performance of the company. So there is no question whether it was past or present or future. Employees will always be the most important and the fulcrum of every organization. I think the issue lies elsewhere. The way to ask this question is, what is it that makes companies deviate from practices that are practices that take care of employees, or don't take an employee first approach? Why does that even happen? That's the real question. The question is not whether they are important, because nobody in this world, I mean, the worst company will also say that employees are the most important. But are there practices, at a level that they truly put employees ahead of other objectives? That's the real question.
Yes. Employee well-being is important, like you said, and people, those who are engaged, mind, body, and soul are very productive. So
Right.
that's very rightly said by you. We move to our next question. How can an organization promote mental health awareness without any stigma or encourage participation?
Mamshel, this is also, uh, see, this is all of this, the way I look at it, is this is all social conditioning. And if you really look at all kinds of things that we are finding today, whether it is minority rights, whether it is gender bias, whether it is, anything else which is economic, or so, all of them are rooted in our social structures. For decades, or like, for the longest time, we have not understood mental health issues or mental well-being as an issue at all, and there is stigma associated to that. So in the end, organizations are not different animals, right? They are all reflection of our communities and embedded in the social system only. So the stigma at workplace is there only because there is stigma in the society. So this is also has to go through that evolutionary phase where the society also understands that this is, there is no stigma around this. That will happen slowly. But companies, obviously, I think, even with respect to gender bias, companies have, I would say, amongst all the stakeholders, whether it is, families or communities or companies are actually doing much better than families and communities. All the gender biases are still in the social sphere. Companies are progressing much better, in terms of fixing the problem. So mental well-being, I think, if companies and HR managers and CEOs and HR departments start to take the lead in sensitizing people to what this really means, and why is this important, and why this needs should not be frowned upon, they will accelerate the change, and that will accelerate, slowly percolate down to other layers, and the whole social system will also sort of join that engine.
Thank you. So my next question would be, in your experience, then which initiatives can have an impact on productivity, retention, or company culture?
So it's different strokes for different folks. I'm not sure if there is a common thread, but in general, I think there are, depending on what you need from a company, it depends upon the kind of company you are. For example, if you have repetitive tasks, let's say you are a textile company, which is like an assembly line, you need to prioritize speed. So everybody has to, minute by, they can't they value every minute of time that you have, and it is repetitive. So you have to be absolutely ruthless with respect to your processes. As opposed to an advertising agency, right, where you people can't stick to a routine. People have to have greater level of creativity. You want them to think, so that they come up with the best lines or the best way of visualizing something. So it depends upon the nature of business and what do you wish to accomplish. So that will drive what should be the culture of the company. What do you prioritize? So for example, there is this fantastic author named Daniel Pink, and I really love his work. He's a global thought leader. So his work was around the fact that if you give one off day, which is like it's a work day, but you tell people that one day in a month you don't have to do anything. So that has so people are at work, but they don't have to do sales call. Let's say if it's an organization, they don't have to do sales calls. If it's a media organization, they don't have to file stories. You don't have to chase anything on that day. You do whatever you want. That fosters creativity, and that delivers for the company. So I think the important thing about productivity, culture, efficiency, retention, all of these things have to be seen in the context of what business you are in, and therefore how do you and what are your key objectives and goals, and how do you align the organization's culture around accomplishing those goals. And it cannot be the same for different companies.
I agree. We come from different industries, and the place I used to work earlier is different manufacturing, so it works
Right.
differently there.
Correct.
And what works for you probably will not work for me. But at the end of it, what depends is how you engage your people, how
Yes,
you manage the culture, and bring about the positivity.
most certainly. Most certainly.
So, in the current corporate scenario, then burnout is on the rise.
Yeah.
How can leaders strike a balance between business performance and employee well-being?
So there is a lot of literature around this. So the issue is that everybody recognizes that employees are important. The issue really is for managers, what you need to accomplish and their goals are really here and now. There is a definite conflict in terms of what you are expected to deliver as as business leaders or managers versus how much you push people. And that conflict is difficult to always define, right? Because any kind of balance question is always very hard to answer. Should you do this, and in what proportion should you do? So this is all, you have to feel and go with the flow and figure out what is the right thing, because we all know how much to push and where to withdraw with respect to all our relationships or whatever you do. So in companies also, companies tend to, managers will also tend to push to the extent they can push, and then they will withdraw. Sometimes they end up pushing more and then pushing people away. And that is why HR departments also exist, and they must, only because the objectives of business sometimes are at odds with what we want to accomplish for the well-being of our employees. And for obviously sustained business performance, you can't keep annoying your employees and pushing them, because then obviously retention will be a problem, your attrition will be high, and you'll not be able to retain talent. So you will be constantly in the state of unrest, and business performance will suffer. But for people who are taking those calls at that point, it's just like politicians, right? Like they have this fixed 5-year term. Everybody knows what is the right thing to do for this country to be at a be at a certain level in 2047. But the current government's tenure is only 5 years, so they prioritize, how do I do things in a way that in 5 years, in the next election I get re-elected. Similarly in business also, you'll say next quarter I need this performance, today I need to close this deal, today I need to dispatch this stuff, today I need to get this interview done, so I need to somehow get it done. So that becomes your priority. So one is a very realistic goal setting. that this is what we should gun for. And the problem with goal setting often is that most of the even in terms of goal setting for people, I often find that most organizations set goals for their based on their best performers, and not everybody is equally equipped, not everybody is equally competent. You always have this bell curve where some of them are stars, some of them are duds, and bulk of them are in the middle. But if you set goals for your stars, then the rest of your pack is always going to struggle, and then you're going to complain that, oh, all of you guys are, then you'll push everybody towards that and end up pushing them away. So I think much of this can be resolved by having addressing these issues at the goal setting level. Once the goals are set, and then everybody aligns and says that, okay, this is what we can accomplish. Does that make sense to you?
So I think, if I have to go back to what you said, organizations should take care of all sets of people, not just the high potentials. There's a bag of people.
Yeah,
There's a mixed bag.
it's not about, I'm not even saying taking care. I'm saying that, let's say your best performer can do a certain task in 5 hours. Now, so 70% of your people may not be able to accomplish that job in 5 hours. They will do it in probably 7 hours or 8 hours or 6 hours. Obviously, somebody who does it in 10 hours is out. He is like, you're done, and you're constantly trying to push them out of the system. Uh, the issue is, you say, hey, this guy has been able to do it, so how come you are not doing it? So you push them and say, you got to finish this by tomorrow morning and give it. And then that person has to push himself or herself to be able to complete that task or do that or follow up, and then come back. So this creates dissonance. So if the goals are more realistic, you say an average person, okay, and if I want better performance, then this is where I want to set. And then you align all your people according to that. So goal setting, understanding your team, having a team that sort of delivers to is aligned to that goal. All of these, I think, will create the right deliver the right will allow you to actually prioritize this employee well-being also.
In some time back, you just mentioned, that HR should play a role. But do you think wellness is the responsibility solely of HR or every leader? What's your comment?
Again, ma'am Shil, these are very obvious answers, because anybody in an organization who is looking at a P&L doesn't need to be have a CFO. You need to be the CFO. Anybody who is handling a P&L should be a good salesperson. You need to be so every leader at a certain level is a numbers person, is a salesperson, is a marketing person, is an HR person. He has to wear all these hats. The issue is that when your objectives are, or your primary objective, suppose you are sales head, your primary objective is sales, and that is at odds with with employee well-being, there is a disconnect and a clear conflict, because you are prioritizing, just like I said, you are prioritizing your here and now, while you should be prioritizing well-being, because that is what gives you long-term results, and that is why we need this intervention. So while it is correct that every manager or a leader should also be an HR manager, should also be empathetic, tolerant, prioritize employees, all of that is true. But the practical problem is people wear this primary hat with one objective, and they get blinded by that objective because they're under so much business pressure to perform on that they sort of get blinded and don't prioritize the other things. That doesn't make it right. I'm just saying, so therefore, while we keep sensitizing our leaders and managers to prioritize employee well-being, there also have to be proper processes and people driving this as their primary objective. And let me, tell you a very interesting conversation I had many, many years ago. I had the opportunity to interview Warren Buffett. And for many years now, that this narrative around, I think when I joined workforce and as a journalist, the most important criteria that companies would prioritize was always, so for the last 100 years or perhaps more, since corporations existed, profit was the most important objective. So what is the return that you deliver to shareholders was, be all and end all of companies. But in the last, I think 15, 20 years or so, this whole idea of ESG, which is, prioritizing environment, social governance, that's one aspect. Some people, like Clayton Christensen and many people outside have talked about what they call a triple bottom line approach, which is your shareholder return is just one criteria. You have to also look at your bottom line from the perspective of communities and also from the perspective of your employees, because they're all stakeholders in the company. It is not just your shareholders to whom you owe your profits. So I asked about this triple bottom line approach to Warren Buffett, none other than Warren Buffett, and he said that he didn't quite think that it'll go too far, because he says the problem with triple bottom line is you can only have one master. You cannot serve multiple masters. So now, but then we are trying to do that by prioritizing companies' profits and business goals, prioritizing communities and our environmental goals, and employee well-being. These are multiple objectives. So the answer obviously is to get to a level where nothing is completely compromised. Everybody comes to a certain, all these objectives are met in an optimal way, but we'll not be able to maximize all of them, because it's always some level of trade-off.
My next question would be, what one piece of advice would you give to companies looking to create a truly inclusive and mentally healthy workplace?
I think the most important piece in this is sensitizing people to to make them realize that there is no stigma around, around mental well-being. If you're not well, if you're depressed, if you're etc., then there should be no stigma attached to it. The other issue is also about privacy, right? Like I don't know, even if we were to have uh, you know counselors, you have support systems that companies provide. How do you ensure that people feel really safe in those environments to discuss their issue and not feel that they will be at the receiving end because they're not well? Because these things often happen in companies, where you say that, okay, you're not well, why don't you take like 3 months off? 3 months off essentially means that you forego 3 months of pay. Can you really afford to do that? You're already, not in a good place. So these things are very hard, but the important part is that, you have to nevertheless make the effort to sensitize people to the issue and galvanize the team as a whole to, be a little more tolerant, empathetic at every level, whether it is peer group or leaders. There has to be some sort of sensitivity to the cause. I think that apart from all the other practices that companies may pursue, this is very important in setting the culture.
Yes, I have to just add on to that, in terms of well-being. Most organizations, no, I can't say most, but some of the organizations have started counseling. But those organizations really have to kind of make a lot of confidence, build up a lot of confidence with the people to ensure that whatever they speak is in confidence.
Right,
Once
right,
once the people feel that this is the organization I look forward to working, this is the
right,
organizations that are taking care of my mind, and
right,
it's a confidential process, then people start, kind of opening up, and that really helps.
right,
But building that culture will take a long time.
right,
And it's a
right,
lot of hard work because It's not easy to get people into confidence and say what you speak is within that door,
Right,
inside that room, and not it's not for everyone to know what you're going through. So it
right,
is a change in culture. It will take time. I've been working in an organization that really promoted mental well-being, and I think we were very successful with not just the corporate offices but also with the blue-collar people, and it worked beautifully.
right, right.
So my next question then to you, Mahalakshmi, is how can organizations create a more inclusive workplace culture that actively supports women leaders like you and career advancement?
So again, there is this notion, and people often I see championing this whole idea that women need greater level of flexibility, and a lot of women also ask for this, in the sense that we just need flexibility to work from home, we need flexibility to attend to children, or some permission or a few hours if you have to attend a parent teachers meeting or something else, or caregiving, etc. I think, and there is a great insight that came to me from one of the woman CEOs and a business leader. She said this is not the way to address this problem, because first of all, women are not, most women think, we all think we are super women, but we're not. We're all also normal human beings only. We don't need to pretend to be super women who can handle everything, career and home and children and everything. uh, so uh, so going back to what she said was, this is going to be solved, and the company actually executed this, is to sensitize men and give them the same liberties that women also should be given. For example, they are given 4 days, you could take half a day to attend to any personal children requirements. For example, you need to go to school, you can take half a day off for a parent teachers meeting. So it is equally for men and women, uh, because otherwise you are just burdening the women and condemning to them to do take on all these responsibilities, and being slightly unfair to them, because the cognitive load of doing all this or taking this burden is huge. And I don't think it's a great idea to move in that direction. The idea is to bring some sort of reform in thinking within organizations to encourage men to do the same kind of duties. So if that becomes the practice at workplace, and people say that, Arey, why your son is in 10th standard, how come you are not taking leave for board exams? And the men feel also that they have to measure up to that, and they have to also contribute. Then you are really solving for the problem. Um, so, sorry, now I forgot the question I was answering.
That's
So you were
okay.
saying, what could we do for women leaders? So my
Yes.
answer to that is, instead of addressing women leaders, you need to address everybody in the room, everybody at the workplace, to be able to make life better for them. Otherwise, they will carry a huge load and a disproportionate load, and that's not good for their own well-being.
Actually, I just had all these questions lined up, but I had one last question, which I really wanted to check with you. And that's on, you've always been the one that's been conducting interviews and gathering other people's views and opinions. How did it feel to be on the other side of the table today?
Oh, terrible. Terrible, Mamshel, because I don't have the answers to anything. I'm just sharing whatever comes to my mind, and you are such a lovely person, such a wonderful friend, and so I definitely enjoyed it. So thank you so much for this opportunity. But I wouldn't do it with anyone else.
That's a, I think I'm grateful. Well, friends, to all of you watching this episode, I have a message for every woman out there. We are strong, resilient, and capable of handling any situation with grace. We are created to adapt and thrive in any circumstance. Coming from an HR background and having played various roles, today I had the privilege of interviewing one of the finest interviewers of the country. Thank you so much for your valuable inputs on well-being in workplace. Yes, it's time for organization to prioritize mental well-being, just as they do physical health, ensuring that employees feel safe, valued, and empowered to seek help when needed. I think change starts with an open dialogue. Let's continue the conversation and build a workplace where mental health is a priority and not a taboo anymore. On behalf of the Ambrosian team, I extend my warmest wishes to you and all the incredible women listening to us today. A happy Women's Day. Today is not just a celebration, but a call to action. It's time to rise, speak openly about our mental well being, and break the silence surrounding mental health. Let's ensure our voices are heard, our concerns are acknowledged, and our well being is prioritized in every workplace. Thank you so much, Mahalakshmi, once again for being our host today.
Not at all. My pleasure entirely. Thank you so much, Ma'am Shiv.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.